Greetings, my name is JC.
And I'm Ian.
And this is the Gamer's Gaiden. In this episode, we're going to be doing a review of the game Gris. We recently played this game just over the last few weeks, and we're here to talk about it.
Yeah, I'd seen this when it came out much earlier in the year. And,
because it came out in December on PCs of 2018, actually.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then it actually won the Games for Impact at the Game Awards this year?
Yeah, the nominees were Concrete Genie, Life is Strange 2, Sea of Solitude, and Kind Words. I don't know what that one is, but yeah, it's kind of like an indie game category, I would like to think it as. But
yeah,
Game for Impact, it was definitely an interesting game. I remember seeing sort of it show up, but I never really looked into the game or saw it as something that I wanted to play until after I actually saw the 2019 Game Awards, and I hadn't even watched the trailer of it. I only saw the logo.
Yeah,
and I was
same.
like, oh, this game actually looks kind of interesting. And as the awards were kind of going up, I like to sort of bring up the game's trailers and some quick reviews on them to quickly look at them something to do while I'm watching the award show. And it intrigued me. So I spoke with Ian about it, and I'm like, we should probably really play this game. It looks kind of fascinating, everything from its art style to its music and gameplay mechanics. So we decided to take the plunge and give it a try.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the first game this year that I finished.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, because we played it like the second week of January.
Yeah, and it does not take long.
No, I believe it's like 4 to 5 hours long. There is
depending how good you are at the platforming sections.
Yeah, and there are some extra things that you can do to collect more objects, but which sort of is more like if you want to be a completionist with the game. So like I definitely only did, I think, like 80% of the content to be honest. But yeah, played through it. I think it was like 4 hours and 10 minutes or something like that. Somewhere around there. Just basically beat it on a lazy Sunday, so to speak, and it was really fun.
Yeah, I had a really good time with this. I think the biggest surprise for me was the getting like an emotional response.
Yeah, that was almost immediate too, because the game sort of starts off with this like really like simplistic yet elaborate like watercolor style graphics almost.
Yeah.
And it's this woman who is essentially like singing some sort of melody, and I guess the main premise of it is she loses her voice and has to basically re-find her voice, and it's sort of the adventure of her refining her voice or herself or something. It's kind of metaphoric. There's no spoken dialogue in the game except for like the hymning melody that the character sings once you regain like portions of your voice, because initially if you try, you have like run, jump, and
you kind of
action button, and then you have like a button because she's like completely lost her voice. Yeah, it was kind of interesting, and a lot of the imagery in the game sort of paralleled that loneliness, abandonment, and refining oneself, sort of, because like there was a lot of statues in the background that were either like crying or broken apart, and different things like that, where it was interesting how the game sort of took its style and just sort of told its story through its imagery. And on top of that, the other interesting thing that really caught my eye was that at the very first scene, there's full color in the game, the complete like gamma of color, and then all of it is essentially taken away, and you only have one color, and then you go through each of the primary colors from like red, green, and blue, and you basically go through a level that's like color themed almost, and whenever you complete it, that color sort of comes back
into
to
your
life, into your world, as you sort of like do the different like platforming basically. Overall, it is a puzzle platforming game, more so a platforming game, but there are some like puzzle elements in the effect of like you have to sort of figure out how to sort of go about some of the platforming and stuff like that, or where to collect these little like they're kind of like stars or
basically
something.
Stars, because you form these constellations that help you basically move on to new paths.
Yes, and I thought that was kind of neat because it didn't really tell you much in the way of sort of teaching you how to play the game. Like it didn't narrate like, hit A to do this,
it tells
or
you
something
nothing.
like that. It does have some prompts in the top right of the screen, like this button is for this, and that's basically all it tells you.
Yeah.
And from there, you sort of have to use your skill set and the environment and how you've interacted with it to sort of figure out how to essentially progress throughout the levels. And to me, it felt a lot like the old platforming games, like the original Marios and stuff like that, where nothing was really taught to you, and you kind of had to figure out the latter parts of the game yourselves by combining your different abilities. And I just was kind of glad of the amazing game design of and attention to detail, basically, to sort of like teach you how to do these different things without even having to say anything. And I found that was really impactful for its presentation, basically.
See, I would compare it a little bit more to like a Zelda.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Zelda
it's that
good comparison too.
That concept of getting a new ability, using the heck out of that new ability, and then when you move on to the next section, you're getting another ability, and then you're really like, and it's like a culmination of getting these new abilities and then learning to use them constantly, and then finding ways to combine them.
Yeah, and I felt that each of the different...
Not to cut you off, but by the end, you have to use everything.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah,
actually.
it's that like
I never felt that I was never reusing one of my early abilities. I always needed to use everything that I had like been developing throughout the entire game, which is really nice because I find like a lot of Metroidvania style games sort of forget about, except for like the really stellar ones, a lot of them sort of forget about some of the abilities that you can do. And it's like, yeah, sure, you learned how to double jump in level 3, but once you got to like level 20, you're not really double jump anymore, you're wall sliding, you know what I mean? Like, you're not really using that ability anymore, as an example. And I felt that, like, yes, some sections like got you to use some abilities more so than others, obviously, but it still mixed things up a little bit, that I never really felt that any of the elements of its game design were really forgotten. And it just opened up more and more and branched out, which was it made me like the game even more. It was really, really well designed in its gameplay aspects, for sure, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a challenge for me. It's always been a challenge for me to sit down and play something through to completion. And I know that working on this with you has really helped me with that, because a lot of times now we're playing these things to talk about them. But this was effortless. Like this didn't take any extra push to make it through.
Flow was just very progressive, in the sense that you wanted to keep on playing. And a lot of games don't necessarily have this type of flow, because a lot of the times, like especially like in like one of my favorite genres, role-playing games, there's usually like a stutter in the flow somewhere, where it kind of like,
oh man, RPGs are constant peaks and valleys.
Exactly. Or it's just like the flow is monotonous because it's always the same. But I think partially because like this game isn't long, as we said, it's about 4 hours long, so that does help it. But each of those different areas of like different colors had like their own thematic to it, and then overlapping thematics as you kind of progress throughout the game, which helped that flow.
Yeah.
And every area felt unique and had its own breath of life. and that
Well,
definitely helped it.
and feeling that color come back into the world, like I really do think this is kind of like a metaphor for grief.
It certainly is.
You know, like
There's a lot of emotions that this game really portrays metaphorically to the player throughout its different imagery and sort of just stylistic choices of even like how the platforming is done. For the like one area is rain, and it in another area it's sort of like more springtime and stuff like that, and it sort of like plays on the environments itself, like the trees are sort of, their leaves are made of water, for example, or it'll be leaves and stuff like that, as this person is kind of like progressing forward in their journey to refine their voice.
Yeah, and it was I thought it was very well told. Like it shoehorns you into going to each of the worlds in sequence.
There is a couple sections where you can choose to go left or right. It's still the same sequence, but you could have like gotten one star over the other, and like, but it's still the same area. But yes, it is very linear in that respect. Otherwise,
Yeah, but you do like you start in the colorless hub world essentially, and then you continually go back as you're bringing color back into the worlds, and you really do feel like she's gaining herself back.
and it's really neat to see this evolution of the areas too, because like you mentioned, you do go to the same area again, and as more color is layered over top, it's so neat how they did this too, because essentially like the first color you unlock is red, and then the second one is
Green.
a green, and it's not just that the world is only green, it'll be red and green, and then you'll see like the world kind of like dual chrome together. I don't know if that's really a phrase, but that's like two colors at the same time, really, and then eventually like the full spectrum and stuff like that. And that world, the hub world area where a lot of the areas are connected, looked more lush and sort of vibrant as each of these colors sort of came to the palette of your world, essentially.
Well, yeah, and it was rebuilding as well.
Yes.
It was very broken down when you begin, and it starts becoming more. You know, it really like it's expanding. There's more aspects to it. It's nicer looking. Like it doesn't look all broken down anymore.
Yeah.
And it really does play on that, you know, getting your life back together.
Well, let's talk about some of the sort of level and game design of sort of how some of the platforming is. So we've mentioned that you gain different abilities and stuff like that. And it is a platforming game, so a lot of it is sort of jumping around and stuff like that. But what's neat about it is that the levels are sort of similar to, if you grew up in the Super Nintendo Genesis era, a lot of the levels are sort of like these large block areas, and you got to figure out how to get through the level by like even double backing on certain areas, because now you've like
you got
open
3
a pillar or
stars,
something
so
like
now
that.
you can open up a new pathway.
Yeah, and I found that was I haven't seen a game that has really used that old style effectively in a very long time. And it was kind of neat because like in the water area was a big area where you sort of backed on yourself almost 2 or 3 times.
A lot.
And you had to like, if you messed up, you might like jump down and stuff like that. But had to like recorrect yourself, but it was kind of neat because you had the ability to turn into a block and then smash some ground, or you could there's like a double jump in it.
Yep.
And there's like some swimming mechanics in it as well, where like you can swim straight up waterfalls and stuff like that, and sort of like there's some lines. I think this was kind of like one of my favorite mechanics. Some areas had a line and it was like a gravity.
Yep.
And then so if you swam and jump high enough, gravity would essentially flip so that you were falling towards the ceiling and you could like land in water again. And it was just so seamless and unique that it just worked so well for something that was so unrealistic of like swimming through the different areas and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you almost had this speed burst
Yeah.
as you were swimming, and you could hit that to get the momentum.
Yeah.
And then you fall, and then you'd move through a section, and then you use your like double jump to get back into the water.
Yeah, and it's all on these like really interesting spires and towers that you have to also sort of like climb or go onto different levels of like trees and things like that, and sort of like maybe have to figure out how to like some objects allow you to like collect and jump higher, for example, in the game, and you kind of have to just progress higher and higher and things like that. It was just so unique because like the whole thing with its like aesthetic of like, as I mentioned, it sort of looks like a watercolor painting almost that's animated, and its layering effects of how the levels sort of work and how with the platforming and stuff like that. You'd have like the trees sort of like moving in sequence and stuff like that for your jumps and your timing and stuff. And there's even some and like somewhat enemies and stuff like that, where most of them are bosses, but or like big bads, I should say.
Yeah.
Like a really interesting experience with like this one bird that you had to like figure out how to sort of trick in order to get past. And
Yes.
yeah.
And but again,
really
that was
cool.
using all of your abilities.
It
to
would scream at you,
navigate
and
through
you'd
it.
have to like change into like a box, the stone like box shape, in order to like prevent them from like screaming you away and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that was really cool because that like box shape you use a lot in the first level. Like in the first level when you get it, because there's these like windy sections
Yeah.
that would blow you back. And you don't use it as much.
Right.
And then it's so key. And you do use it more as you go. I don't know. I love that concept.
Yeah.
And I love that, like, here's an ability. We're going to teach you how to use it over the course of this level. And then as you move into the next level, you're going to use it a little bit. But once you get this next ability, we're going to like really hammer that one home.
Yes.
And then eventually it's the Zelda thing, which we were talking about earlier. And
Yeah.
I'm looping back on myself, but I love that. And not enough games do that. It's like you said, you get, new, bigger thing. It's your old thing's gone. It's like now you have triple jump. I don't need double jump.
Right. Yeah, and with what's interesting also with these mechanics and the level design and sort of like how a lot of it was kind of designed in a way that you wouldn't sometimes go like up sections or like over into different areas and things like that. The way that the levels were sort of drawn, like if you look closely, you can see like, oh, can I actually like jump on this like ledge? And sometimes you could and sometimes you couldn't, right? You'd have to sort of like use the style of the game to try and figure out sort of how to like use the level itself in order to figure out like, okay, well, I see water here and I know I can swim in or jump in and swim into like these water areas and stuff like that, or I can sort of like jump on these sort of like gears and then sort of like climb that a little bit to see if I can get this bell down or something like that, right? In order to like complete this puzzle section and stuff like that. And it was really neat. And also any of the sections where you kind of had to figure out any of these like puzzles and these blocks to your path and things like that, they weren't super hindering. Some of them took a little bit to figure out. You have to kind of like sit there for a second and say like, okay, I know I can do this. How do I figure this out? And then like, but it wasn't so difficult that it felt like overwhelmingly like I'm never going to figure this out. I'm just going to look it up. It was a nice, even difficulty, I'd say. And in these sections, you weren't really overly bombarded with enemies or anything like that to make it more frustrating for you, which was really nice, especially in a game like this. There are some sections, I'd say, in the levels where there are some things that sort of like impede your hindrance, and it does make it a little bit harder. But the thing about that is it's part of like the reason why you can't pass. You kind of have to figure out how to bypass those, for example. And things.
I don't know. I loved how they like the story was told through the levels. Really, like you have when you start out, everything's like totally colorless and broken down, and then when you move into the red, it's it's like a desert. It's very lonely. It feels very oppressive.
Yes,
I found. and then it kind of keeps
it's not until
evolving.
And it's neat because like later you finally find like some little friends and stuff like that. There's like the little forest spirit. I think that's my favorite part of the game actually, is where you're collecting apples for this little forest spirit.
Yeah, he's like your little buddy, and it's like
he helps you because you help him and stuff like that. And it's
a little
like,
lift up.
Yeah,
but then you also like it's like you get lifted up a little bit, and then you get knocked down again, and you get lifted up a little bit, and you get knocked down again, and it's I don't know
And it's really interesting because like it continually builds this up, and then finally at the end, all of a sudden it's just like it's kind of like if you've ever experienced sort of like hardships in your life, you can probably relate to this, because like eventually sometimes it sort of felt like everything was kind of coming into the clear, and like a couple of chapters, so to speak, before the end of the game, there's like a big climax, like catastrophe that happens, like something's like really, really chasing you. It seems like, oh crap, this is happening all over again, and you're just trying to escape it and run away from like this sea creature basically, and then it's sort of like, because this looming dread or something is following you. Like it's very metaphoric, so it's hard to say what it really is. But yeah, because like this thing keeps on following you through the game. It's like a bird, and then it's a fish, and like it's chasing you, right?
Yeah, and it I don't know. To me, it was a lot like dealing with grief.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's
and
you have this like you're just like you're totally broken, and then you get a little bit better, and then you get broken again, and you know, you get a little bit better next time, and then
I find it really interesting to see like if a psych major or something like that were to play this game and analyze sort of like how it's parallels with like the different stages of grief like that. I'd like to see like their input on the game, just to see sort of like how that was incorporated, because it definitely felt like that type of stuff was definitely considered in everything within the game. It was really, really cool.
Yeah, and I appreciated the fact a lot that, I mean, for one, I love organic storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of my favorite things.
It's so hard to do well.
Yeah.
It's so effective whenever it's done well.
And that, I think that's why this really pulled like an emotional response for me, because it just like, it drew me in,
mm-hmm.
and they didn't need to use words.
Yeah, I honestly thought,
feelings,
based off of what I had seen previous to playing this game, that the main character would have at least said something in monologue or like in her mind or something like that, because I think that could have fit as well, but I'm almost glad they didn't, because it was so effective.
Yeah, it let you attach your own feelings to it.
Exactly. And on top of all of this layer of like impact, the music just really closed everything together, because the music, I feel, really drove home the emotion of it. If you were to play this game on mute, you would be missing almost half the experience, in my opinion, because it was very well cued, and I almost wish I knew about this game whenever we did the episode on music and video games, because I would have mentioned this game for sure.
This was like after coming off of playing Death Stranding recently,
mm-hmm.
Which I thought had amazing music, and the way that they like would move into music, I thought was almost perfect. But this does it does as well of a job,
mm-hmm.
because they use the music to tell the story.
Yeah, because
like their music's a part of the story.
It's an indie game, and as we've mentioned in previous episodes, one of the things that we really like about indie games is that they usually take one or two things to concentrate on and excel at those, instead of like a AAA game, which has so many resources that they attempt to excel at everything. And their two things are the art style and the music, I would say, for this game.
And the story.
Yeah, well, that it was told through the music
art and the music,
right? So,
but the music wasn't it. To me, the music was never center stage. It was always there,
mm-hmm.
but it was so subtle, But
I don't know if it really was, because if you think about it, like I was mentioning, if you play this game on mute, it would have been a different experience.
Oh, totally. Like
100%.
you had these big moments where it would ramp right up,
mm-hmm.
and then
because it played with her emotion.
It did.
It portrayed her emotion as well. I feel the main character.
I don't know. I agree with you. I still don't think the music was like right in your face. Like, it's not a very hard soundtrack. It is very like soft, but then it has its up tempo moments. This isn't gonna make your workout mix.
Well, no, but see, but no, but that like it doesn't necessarily have to be like the best pop tune in existence.
No,
or something
no,
for you to want to work out to it.
I'm not saying that. I'm just so for a point of reference, like it, Death Stranding, you'd go through these really hard like moments, and then you'd end that with pulling the camera back and kicking into like a song.
Yeah, that's a cinematic trope.
Yeah. Oh yeah, huge. And they did it like 40 times throughout the course of that game.
Yeah. Whereas this is
just
more
like
of
the sound. It's always there.
It's a sound design.
Yeah, like it never goes quiet. It just ramps in the more intense moments.
Yeah, it's kind of like the music in the background of After Party or Life is Strange or any of those other types of games where like music isn't necessarily the main focus, but it's definitely something that sort of like pieces together through the sound design and its choices to the moments in the game. It's not like a cinematic musical experience. It's more of a
as like a storytelling mechanic.
Yes.
And I liked that they used some similar elements,
right,
in like to convey certain things, like with the wind blowing.
Yep,
that was a particular musical phrase,
right.
And anytime that element would be introduced into the gameplay, whether it was like specifically the wind or like something else that was like blowing or pressuring, you would know. Okay, well, I got to use the ability to stop me from blowing across the map.
Yeah.
But it was still part of the soundtrack.
Yes.
And I thought that was so well done. Mm-hmm. You have this like nice kind of like lilting along music.
Yeah, it's
through most of it, and then you get these like really intense moments through the boss fights, and yeah. It's
the sound design. That's what you're basically explaining. Yeah.
I like the sound design, JC. Review over. Game good.
Game good at a 10. Yeah, so I guess let's move on to our final thoughts on the game, unless there's something specific.
Game good. It's better than Third Birthday.
Yes, out of 10.
Out of 10.
Every game in existence, almost.
No, I'm trying to make notes for the things that I finished this year. Not to the extent that my friend JC makes, but just a little reminder of like what I thought when I finished this. And my only note was that this made me cry. And it didn't like pull actual tears from my face because I don't know, I have a hard time crying, but it really got that emotional response from me. And
it was definitely a very emotional game for sure.
It surprised me. It really surprised me that I felt so strongly playing this.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's 4 hours long.
Yeah.
It's
certainly worth your time.
I haven't had
agree.
An experience like that in a long time. Like
you could watch 2 movies, sure, but I think you'd get almost more of an experience playing this game than like watching 2 like average blockbuster movies.
Well, because I think you're able to attach yourself to it. You're able to draw comparisons to your own life.
Yeah.
In this game. And from this story, because it's something we can all identify with. We've all had hard times. We've all suffered like loss and dealt with grief, and this game was a perfect example of it. It really illustrates how hard and colorless everything is right at the beginning, and then how over time you bring that color back into your life, and you have hard days that you have to struggle through. But eventually you get to the point where you have your voice back and you feel normal and there's color in the world again.
That's a very good way of putting it.
And that, I think this game just demonstrates this perfectly. Like that was my takeaway from this game. yours might be completely different. You might see something different from this that I'm not seeing. I mean, we all feel what we want to feel when we're playing something, and this hit me there, like that. This is what I got out of this, and I was just so impressed by this, and really surprised to be that impressed and not have heard way more people screaming about this game.
Yeah, that's the one thing that as well, because whenever I finished the game, I was like, okay, a couple my friends have to play this game, and I literally just got it for them. I was just like, you have to play this now. It's only 4 hours of your time. It's Saturday. Here, you have something to do this afternoon. And
yeah, I woke up and I had an email saying that I had a game on my GOG account. Thanks, JC. Now I own one game on GOG.
Do you own two?
Oh yeah, the free one.
Well, there's multiple free games that they've been out.
Okay, so I have some free games that I got on GOG, but one game that somebody paid for that wasn't me. It was JC.
Fair enough.
And it says, honestly, I'm so happy to have played this, and I do really appreciate you you handing me that experience. Like it was a lot.
Yeah,
like I said.
I'm glad that I saw the game at the Game Awards, as good and bad as the Game Awards were, because there's kind of mixed feelings on that. But I'm glad it enticed me to play this game, and that it gave me this experience. The game gave me this experience because it's great. It would have been on my best game of the last decade, to be honest with you. And since we hadn't played it, I believe this was a game that we mentioned at the end of the episode that it might be on there. We're not entirely certain. If it wasn't, it should be. And it's very, very good. I think anybody who likes platforming games or games that are just like different in the indie genre, games that have a very like impactful art design and sound design would really like this game.
The watercolor was really well done too.
Yeah.
Like watercolor is not something that's easy to do.
And I wouldn't really think of video game whenever I look at watercolors, and now I do. Like, I want more games that sort of look like that. Yes, there are a couple games that I've seen that are sort of like a watercolor style, but like now I just want to see more games like that just because it looked so great.
Yeah, and in my opinion, watercolor is a hard thing to pull off, and this was pulled off so incredibly well. So I thoroughly enjoyed this. Yeah, and I'm really surprised that I haven't heard more people talk about it. I had one person mention this to me before you. One single person. And at the time, she had just said like, oh yeah, I'm playing a little bit of this game called Gris. And I was like, oh yeah, I heard about that. I saw it was released. Let me know how it was. And then I never heard anything else.
Fair.
So, yeah, I don't know whether they just forgot or whatever, but yeah.
Yeah, it seems like this game will likely
I kept mixing this up with Celeste.
Totally different games, but I think this is one of those games that will probably be known more through time and as people talk about it more.
I think so.
And hopefully as this company makes more games, which I'm really hoping that they do, because this game was great, they become more known, and they're continue to make great games, because I'm definitely thoroughly impressed and looking forward to what they do next.
Yeah, I mean, this game itself is an amazing supporter in the argument of games as an art form.
Yeah, 100%.
This is, yeah, you get a lot of people on the other side who are like, man, look at all the Call of Duties, and
yeah,
that's not art. This is art.
There are games that are like art.
This is very much art.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful. It was a beautiful experience. Will I go back?
Maybe in a few years.
Maybe?
I probably wouldn't play this game back to back. But I certainly think that I will probably play this game again in a few years. Whenever it's more in the back of my memory, and I'm like, yeah, that was a really great game, I should replay it. And it's only 4 hours. I'll set aside another Saturday in a few years to play it again.
I think if I was in the right mindset, like I think if I was going through a hard time, I could probably get right into this, and I think it could, cheer me up a little bit, because it, like I said, it parallels so well with that struggle that
everybody has dealt with.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's our review on Gris. Hope you enjoyed it. If you've played Gris, let
us know what you think about it down in the comments below.
Yeah. And if you're new here, welcome. If you made it this far, help us out by giving us a like. Subscribe if you're new. We release podcast episodes every Wednesday, much like this one, and shorter segmented episodes on Monday with Ian and Friday with JC, which is me.
And sometimes in between with both, sometimes not.
Yep. So we'll see you in the next episode.